Hello guys, it's Serge again. I'm continuing my English teaching seminars, but today's seminar is going to be a bit different because it's just you and me. There is nobody here in the room. I will be just continuing, telling you how I think English could be taught, how I do that, and everything. And the topic that I have chosen for today is a lesson. And the things that I want to focus on today is, what is a lesson? What should be the goal of the lesson? What are the parts of a lesson? And, when does it start? When does it finish? And, maybe something else. I'm going to improvise, and I'm going to share with you some of my experience, basically the way I do things, not necessarily because they are right or because it is the right way things should be done, but because it's the way things should be done, but because, this is how I do things. But at the same time, I'm going to tell you how I have been taught things are meant to be done during a lesson. But again, it's all up to you to decide just how you're going to practice it, how you're going to apply it. And it is up to your experiments, up to your creativity, up to your risk-taking. Yes, it is up to you. Experiment on your guinea pigs called students, dear English students. Right, so lesson. And the first thing I would like to talk about is, when does a lesson start? And I think, I have already told you, I've shared with you, and you know that when you understand that you want your students to know something, when you feel that there is something you want to give them, there's something particular that you want to give them, this is the beginning of the lesson. It can happen a couple of weeks before the lesson, right? You may start thinking about what you would like to teach them and how you'd like to teach them. So this lesson, the idea of the lesson, the idea of the handout of the material, it may be in your head for quite a long time, or it can be just a completely green lesson. You enter the classroom with absolutely no idea of what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. Sometimes even you will not know who is going to be there in the classroom, who will show up, what the levels of the students are and everything. But the lesson starts when you want to give your students something. And please focus on that. Don't think too much about the words you want to teach, the text you would like to give, the grammar you want to explain. All these things are important, definitely, but they do not constitute the core of what the lesson is, of what teaching is all about. So, of course, when you're teaching, it's most of the time, it's either some grammar rules or some vocabulary topics, some words and phrases on the topic of holidays and job, education and everything. Or it can be a text. It can be from a text from a course book, from internet. It can be a video. It doesn't matter. But you're teaching something to your students. What I have found extremely irritating is that when you take a course book and where certain grammar is explained or certain vocabulary is given and everything, whatever the course book is, Headway or Streamline or whatever, very often you can't tell what it is that the course book wants the students to know. Like there's a double page with a text with certain exercises, with certain questions and activities and everything, and nobody understands, or it's not clear, it's not evident, it's not on the surface, what the students are supposed to know by the end of the lesson. Because there's so much language, there's so many words, and sometimes gap fill exercises, matching exercises, whatever, and you can't really tell what the result of the learning of this text, the learning of this topic, what the result should be. Like, what do I want my students to know? And so for me, the beginning of the lesson is making it clear to myself and then to the students, and expressing this clarity, these ideas, on a handout. So making it clear what I want my students to know. And that's why my handouts contain absolutely nothing other than what I want my students to know. So if there's a text, it means that I want them to know it by heart. I want them to know everything. If there are sentences with some vocabulary, then I want them to know all the sentences. So there is nothing extra. Of course, if there were pictures, it would be better. Definitely, I agree. But even if we do the gap fill exercise or open the brackets kind of exercise, I want my students to be able to say in English everything that is written on the handouts that I give them. Very often it's impossible. It's not achieved. They don't do that. Though I encourage them to. They stop somewhere half the way. But it's always clear from the handout. I always know, my students always know, I can easily draw their attention and focus their attention on something. Look, this is what I want you to know. These are the words, this is the dialect, so please learn it by heart. So my way of teaching is very simple. Just select a type of language, whether grammar or vocabulary or text, phrases, whatever. Select it, put it on a clean sheet of paper, and tell students to learn it. Well, of course, I don't just tell, but I explain, I give them exercises and activities, but again, it's easy for them. I'm repeating myself, but still, it is extremely easy for the students to focus their attention on what it is that they want, that they have to know, what it is that I want them to know. And it is extremely important. For example, when you're doing revision, when you've had 50 different handouts, different topics, and the material that I want them to know is at the same time in different places, and they can't revise it because they can't find it, they can't focus their attention on it, and it means that they can't learn it if they can't focus. So what I do when revising, I put all of the things that I want them to know on one sheet of paper or on 2 sheets of paper, depending on how much we've covered. And focus their attention and do some activities with them, some exercises, and tell them, guys, learn it again. So, I do the same when we do texts, but they're so big that it's impossible to learn them by heart. So again, I select the things from the text and put them on a separate sheet of paper, like the phrases, the sentences, words, and again, focus their attention and say, guys, this is what I want you to know. And it's a very simple technique, just result-oriented kind of approach, and the beginning of which is, again, making it clear to myself and to the students what it is that I want them to know by the end of this lesson, by the end of the week, of the unit, of the course, of the topic, whatever. And selecting those valuable pieces of information and getting rid of all the unnecessary things, and just not putting them on the handout at all, or if putting them, again, telling my students what it is that I want them to know. So this is the beginning. So please, always do that. Keep that in mind. And the goals that I can set for my students, well, the ultimate goal is always the same: be able to say it in English. You have to be able to say it in English. And there are different reasons why they should say it in English. Maybe because I want them to translate it, maybe because I want them to answer certain questions, or just tell me some stories, or talk about some topics using certain vocabulary, certain language that we have learned. There are different reasons. But the ultimate goal, of course, is free communication and using the material learned in the free communication. Unfortunately, this ultimate goal is not always achieved, not always reached at the time when I want it to happen. I have to wait. So even if I teach present continuous, for example, and it takes us like a week or two to learn it, I know that my students will be able to confidently use it in their speech without mistakes, not after these 2 weeks, but several months later when we have learned future perfect, maybe conditionals. Only then, under the weight of the new topics that they have studied, this simple topic of present continuous will fall through, will go down into their subconsciousness, into their intuitive feeling of what it should be like. And so that's why the goal of the lesson, on the one hand, it should be like a dish. This is the material, look. On the other hand, the quality with which I want them to know this material can be different. And I cannot expect that my students will be perfect. I mean, I should tell them that I want them to be perfect, but in my heart, I should understand that it's impossible, and I have to be patient and wait until this is born naturally, this knowledge is born naturally after months of experience and practice. So sometimes I want them just to remember, to understand certain grammar rules. So the goal of the lesson for me is to make sure they understand it clearly. And this is one of the, I have the material, grammar topic, and guys, here is the goal. I want you to understand it. And if I make it clear to myself what the actual goal is, and to the students, then it kind of shapes the whole lesson. It helps me understand what I should do during the lesson and how I should do it. This is the major factor that contributes to the way that I do things at the lesson. But maybe I want them to remember certain words. Just remember, like know the meaning, be able to say it in English or in Russian if it's important for some reason. Then again, the activities that I will choose to do with my students at this lesson, when the goal is to remember, or maybe it's one of the goals. Of course, there can be different goals at the same lesson, of course, for sure. But for this material, my goal is, for example, remember. Not be able to use in your free communication. No, it will still have to wait. But just to remember. Then again, my activities will be in accordance with the goal. Or, again, I may set this goal for myself, for my students. Guys, I want you to be able to just produce this language from your memory, or, well, I don't know. I want you to be able to imitate, to use it in your speech, but in a very, very, very controlled way. So, I want you to be able to repeat after me certain sentences, certain phrases, do it correctly, and understanding what you're saying, and understanding, though it is new for you, but you have just learned it, we have practiced it, and now you understand it, and you can somehow, you can process this language, so you can operate it at a very basic level, the ability to, for example, hear and repeat. Well, we're going to talk about this type of drill activity that I like to do with my students later. But my basic point is, yes, the lesson starts with you understanding what you want to give to your students. Then you select the material and put it on a separate sheet of paper. And again, I'm not going into much detail. I'm not showing you the actual pieces of paper, the actual handouts that I give to my students. I could, well, actually I may share some of the handouts if you want. You can write to me and I will send you some of the handouts that I give to my students, no problem. So, but I'm not going into those details, just the rule. I want everything that I want my students to know to be on this separate sheet of paper in one place. And then I set the goal. I want them to know this material at this level. Understanding, sometimes that's the best I can hope for. With present perfect, for example, or passive, or I don't know, modal verbs, like should have, could have, and everything. Just, you understand by the end of the lesson, they have order in their head, great. It's one of the wonderful, the most wonderful, the greatest achievements for them at that stage, not to have a mess in their head when dealing with those topics. Or remember, or being able to use in their speech with more control or with more freedom. And so when I have that material, I enter the classroom, and what happens is, I mean, I am obsessed. I should be obsessed. This is my goal, and I won't, like I told you, I won't stop at anything, but I will achieve it. I will make sure that everyone works towards the goal. That's why my primary goal at the beginning of the lesson is to focus students' attention, to make sure that everyone is ready to work. Because students, they don't come ready, really, unfortunately. They pay their money, they are adults, and they know that they need it, and they are kind of ready to work, but they come with mess in their heads, rushing in their heads, thinking about their life and whatever, sometimes just tired and not wanting to do anything. So they come in different conditions, more or less ready for the lesson. Some of them have done their homework, some haven't done their homework. And energetically, it is very hard to work with a group of 6 people, for example, who are in different conditions. It may be a mixed ability class, so right from the start, their levels are a bit different. Their learning paces are different. And plus, their moods are different. Some of them are more energetic, some less. And all of this variety, it makes my lesson a great challenge. So the first thing for me to do, this is the actual beginning of the lesson, is to feel the group, to understand who is where. That's why I, and my students know it very well, that's why I ask them to tell me something about themselves, about their life, and what has happened. I talk about the 3 magic circles, I tell my students. Please tell me about life, English, homework. So what has been happening in your life recently? Some news, anything interesting? I can ask them to do that as a class, like with 3-4 people sitting telling me. But again, when I'm doing that, I'm making sure that everyone is listening, everyone is working and interested. Or in groups, put them in groups, so pairs, just share news from life. Maybe you had some English contact with English. Watched a movie, read a book, talked with a native speaker, whatever. Share that experience. And yes or no, doesn't matter still. Homework. Have you done anything? What have you been doing? What's the result? How much time you've spent? I often ask my students. Only 2 hours? Bad. That's very little. You should work more. You need 4, at least 4 hours between the lessons. So 7 or 8 hours a week. So I get them to talk, to tell me something, just to feel how ready they are for the lesson. And sometimes the first thing I need to do after that is just throw away the plan of the lesson. I may have come with a certain